The galaxy had never seen such darkness before. For centuries, the Galactic Coalition had stood as a shield against threats that rose and fell like tides. It was not a perfect alliance. Its many species often disagreed, sometimes argued, and sometimes distrusted one another. But when the enemy came, they always fought together. That unity had kept them alive, until now. The Vorlak Empire had changed everything. The Vorlak were not just another warlike race. They were ruthless, patient, and merciless. They conquered system after system, not only with weapons but also with fear. Their fleets were vast, their technology advanced, and their commanders never hesitated to sacrifice millions to win a single battle. Against such an enemy, even the strongest stood little chance. The Coalition tried to resist. They combined the sharp minds of the Coral engineers, the disciplined armies of the Venar, the speed of the Theran scouts, and the wisdom of the Icaran councils. For a time, their unity gave them hope. Together, they slowed the Vorlak's advance. They even won a few victories, though each one cost dearly. But no matter how hard they fought, the Vorlak always returned stronger. It was in the Carthion system that the Coalition truly broke. Carthion had been called the heart of the stars. It was a wealthy system, home to millions of families, a center of trade and knowledge. The Coalition had gathered nearly 1/3 of their fleet there, determined to stop the Vorlak from taking it. They prepared every defense, built fortresses on moons, lined asteroid fields with hidden weapons, and stationed their finest admirals. They promised themselves and their people that Carthion would not fall, but it did. The Vorlak came with fire and shadow. Their fleet was larger than anyone had imagined. They had studied every Coalition strategy, learned from every past battle, and twisted those lessons into a perfect plan of destruction. Within 3 days, the defenses shattered. The fortresses fell silent. The moons burned. The Coalition fleet was scattered and broken, their admirals dead or missing. Millions of refugees fled, but only a fraction survived. The Vorlak showed no mercy. They hunted the helpless, destroyed every signal beacon, and left Carthion as nothing more than ashes drifting in the void. Across the galaxy, despair spread like a disease. In hidden chambers on a distant world, the leaders of the Coalition gathered. The air was heavy with silence. The Grand Council chamber, once filled with confident voices, now seemed like a tomb. Faces were grim and eyes avoided one another. These were the most powerful beings of their species, yet none of them felt powerful now. Councillor Venos of the Venar spoke first. His voice was sharp, but beneath it was fear. They are celebrating already. The Vorlak broadcast their victory across every channel they could find. They want us to know we are finished. They may not be wrong, murmured Sirael of the Icaran, her long silver features pale in the dim light. Carthion was our last hope of holding the core systems. With its fall, there is nothing to stop them from advancing further. Murmurs spread. The Theran representative slammed his clawed hand against the table. Then what do you suggest, Icaran? Shall we kneel? Shall we beg for mercy? You know as well as I do that the Vorlak give none. Silence returned. Everyone knew he was right. For the first time in centuries, the Coalition had no plan. Their fleets were too weak. Their people too afraid. Their enemies too strong. All that remained was despair. It was then that an old voice spoke. Elder Maelkor of the Quarrel, the oldest among them, rose slowly from his seat. His movements were stiff and his eyes were tired, but his voice carried weight. In our archives, he said, there are records. Records of a species we once encountered long ago, on the far edge of the spiral arm. They were judged unstable, too violent, too dangerous to bring into the galactic community, and so we left them. The others turned toward him confused. Some frowned, others tilted their heads. Councillor Venos narrowed his eyes. You speak of forgotten things, Elder. What good are old records when the Vorlak stand at our gates? Maelkor did not flinch, because perhaps what was once seen as a curse may now be our salvation. This species, they were not like us. They thrived on struggle. They grew stronger in chaos. They had wars, yes, but from those wars they gained a resilience unlike anything we have ever seen. They called themselves humans. The word hung in the air like a shadow. Few had ever heard it before. The younger counselors looked puzzled. The older ones looked uneasy. Siriel's calm voice returned. I know of these records. The humans were left alone because they were unpredictable. Their history was filled with conflict. It was decided they could not be trusted with advanced technology. And yet, Melkor said firmly, is that not what we need now? Someone unpredictable, someone who does not follow the same patterns the Vorlak have already mastered. We have given them every chance to predict us, to outthink us. Perhaps it is time we call upon those who cannot be predicted. The chamber grew restless. Some muttered in disagreement, others in cautious curiosity. The idea of contacting such a species seemed reckless, but what choice remained? The coalition had tried everything else. They had followed logic, strategy, and tradition, and still they had lost. At last, Counselor Vanos leaned forward. His expression was hard, but his voice was softer than before. Suppose we find them. Suppose they agree to help. What then? What could one primitive world do against the might of the Vorlak Empire? Elder Melkor's tired eyes held a strange light. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. But I ask you this, Counselor. What other hope do we have? The question struck the chamber like a blade. One by one, the leaders realized the truth. They had no hope left except this. After hours of debate, the decision was made. Quietly, secretly, without broadcasting their intent, the coalition would send an exploration vessel to the far edges of the galaxy. They would search for Earth, the hidden world of the humans. As the meeting ended, Siriel lingered, her silver features reflecting the dim light. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "May we not be too late, and may the humans not be the monsters we once feared." Far beyond the chamber, the Vorlak fleet burned another colony. They drank in their victory, certain that the galaxy was already theirs. They celebrated, laughed, and roared in triumph. They had no idea that in the cold silence of space, a single decision had just been made, one that would change the fate of every star, because the coalition had chosen to call upon the humans. The exploration vessel Aurora's path moved silently through the endless sea of stars. It was not a warship, not even a strong ship. Its shields were weak, its weapons almost ceremonial. But what it carried was far more important than firepower. It carried the last hope of the coalition. The crew had been chosen with care. Representatives from 5 different species stood aboard, bound by a single mission, to find the forgotten world called Earth. Captain Reinar of the Vanar sat in the command chair. His tall, broad figure gave the impression of strength, though his eyes revealed the heavy weight of responsibility. He had fought in battles, seen comrades fall, but nothing had ever pressed on his spirit like this mission. If they failed, the coalition might not survive. Beside him, Elder Melkor of the Quarrel sat with calm patience. The Elder's frail body seemed too weak for space travel, but his mind remained sharp. He was the one who had remembered the humans, the one who had persuaded the Council to take this chance. The others included Sirael of the Icaron, whose voice always carried reason, Terran of the Theron, restless and eager for action, and Kalen, a young Quarrel scientist who had studied old records of Earth more than anyone else. The journey was long. Earth was hidden on the far edge of the spiral arm, a world no one had visited for centuries. Navigating there required passing through quiet, forgotten sectors, places where even the Vorlak had no interest. For weeks, the crew traveled through silent systems where stars burned alone without colonies or fleets. Each day felt heavier than the last. Some doubted, some wondered if the humans even existed anymore. Had they destroyed themselves in wars as the archives had feared? Had they advanced too far and already drawn unwanted attention? Or were they still there, waiting, unaware of the galaxy's suffering? At last, the sensors detected a small yellow star with a cluster of planets circling it. The third planet stood out immediately, green, blue, and white. It shimmered like a jewel in the black void. "Earth," whispered Kalen, her voice trembling with awe. "We found it." For a moment, the entire crew was silent. They stared at the image on the screen as if it were a miracle. Against all odds, after centuries of being forgotten, the humans were still there. The ship entered orbit carefully. From above, Earth looked peaceful. Clouds drifted across blue oceans. Continents stretched wide with forests, mountains, and cities. Yes, cities. Lights glowed in patterns across the night side of the world, showing that humanity had not only survived but thrived. Siriel leaned forward. "They are not primitive anymore. Look at those structures. Look at their technology. They have grown far beyond what the archives recorded." Terran gave a sharp laugh. "Good. Then maybe they are worth something after all." But Captain Reinar was cautious. Do not forget why they were left alone. We must see not only their strength but their nature. If they are as dangerous to us as they are to the Vorlak, then we trade one threat for another. The crew agreed. They had to be careful. A message was prepared, simple and respectful. Using universal symbols and basic transmissions, they introduced themselves as visitors from the stars, peaceful in intent. They asked for a chance to speak. The humans answered quickly. Within hours, the Aurora's path received a reply. A face appeared on the screen, human, male, with sharp eyes and calm expression. His voice carried confidence but also curiosity. This is Commander Elias Ward of Earth. You are not human. Identify yourselves. Captain Reinar stood tall. We are representatives of the Galactic Coalition. We come in peace. We wish to speak with your leaders. There was a pause. Commander Ward studied them, his gaze sharp, his mind clearly racing. Finally, he gave a short nod. Very well. Prepare for landing. You will be received. The crew exchanged glances. The humans had not shown fear or hesitation. They had not panicked at the sight of alien visitors. Instead, they had answered with calm strength. It was unexpected, it was impressive. The Aurora's path descended through Earth's skies. For the first time, the crew felt the pull of the human world. The scent of oceans, the warmth of sunlight, the noise of civilization. They landed at a secure site where human soldiers waited. The soldiers carried weapons, but their posture was controlled. They did not tremble. They did not look away. This world is not weak, whispered Siriel. They are ready for the unknown. Inside a grand chamber, the crew met with Earth's leaders. Men and women of different nations sat together, representing one world. Elder Malkor felt a quiet admiration. In the archives, humanity had always been divided, constantly at odds. But now he saw something else. Unity. The Coalition explained everything. The Vorlak threat, the fall of Carthion, the despair of the galaxy. They spoke of the Coalition's long struggle, and finally of the desperate decision to seek humanity. When they finished, silence filled the chamber. The human leaders whispered among themselves, and at last Commander Ward spoke again. You came to us because you think we are dangerous, he said plainly. Because you hope our nature might save you. Elder Malkor bowed his head slightly. Yes, it is the truth. We believe your people carry something the galaxy has forgotten. Resilience, defiance, the ability to fight when all seems lost. Ward studied them again, his gaze thoughtful. Then to the surprise of the aliens he smiled. It was not a cruel smile nor a mocking one. It was a smile of recognition of someone who understood the weight of struggle. You are right, he said. We are dangerous. Not because we seek war, but because we never stop when war finds us. If your enemy thinks the galaxy is broken, then perhaps they have celebrated too soon. The Coalition representatives felt a spark of hope for the first time in years. These humans, with their calm strength and strange smiles, were exactly what they had prayed to find. But humanity was not quick to agree. Days of discussion followed. The humans asked questions, studied the Coalition's history, weighed the risks. They were not reckless. They wanted to know everything before they chose a side. During these talks, the Coalition crew learned more about humanity. They saw how humans argued fiercely yet still found solutions, how they carried scars from past wars yet used those scars as lessons, how they faced problems with creativity instead of despair. One evening, Siriel spoke quietly to Captain Reinar. They are different from us. Where we see disaster, they see challenge. Where we give in to fear, they find reason to smile. Perhaps this is the strength we lacked. At last, the humans gave their answer. Commander Ward stood before them, his expression firm. We will help you. Not because we must, but because we choose to. The Vorlak may believe the galaxy is theirs already, but they have never faced us. Together we will show them. The words struck deep. Hope, long buried under ashes, rose again in the hearts of the Coalition crew. Humanity had agreed. The forgotten species, once judged too dangerous, had returned to the stage of the galaxy. As the Aurora's path prepared to depart with its new allies, Elder Malkor whispered almost to himself. The Vorlak celebrated too soon. Above Earth, stars glittered silently. Somewhere beyond, the enemy prepared for their next conquest. But now the galaxy would not face them alone, for humanity had been found, and humanity was ready. The Aurora's path returned to the Coalition stronghold with an escort it had never expected, a single human warship. It was smaller than the largest vessels of the Vorlak, but it carried an unusual shape, sharp and angular, with weapons placed in ways that seemed strange to Coalition eyes. It did not follow the smooth designs of most galactic fleets. It looked almost aggressive. Captain Rhinar and the others had worried that humanity would be slow to adapt to galactic technology, but they were mistaken. In only weeks, human engineers had studied Coalition blueprints and refitted one of their own ships. They did not copy the designs exactly. Instead, they combined human creativity with alien science. The result was a vessel unlike any the Coalition had seen before. When the two ships arrived at the Coalition Council Station, leaders and officers gathered to see them. Whispers spread through the halls. Many still doubted the decision to involve humans. They expected primitives, savages, perhaps allies too reckless to control. What they saw instead was discipline, precision, and calm confidence. The human commander, Elias Ward, led the way. He walked with steady steps, wearing a dark uniform with no unnecessary decoration. His face was serious, but his eyes showed focus rather than fear. Behind him came a team of human officers and soldiers, their movements sharp and coordinated. The Coalition Council greeted them formally. But inside, many still wondered, could these humans truly stand against the Vorlak? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. The call for aid only days after humanity's arrival, a desperate signal reached the Council. A small Coalition colony on the edge of Vorlak territory was under attack. The enemy had launched a raid to crush morale, destroying supply depots and capturing civilians. The colony had no fleet strong enough to defend itself. The Council debated quickly. Their remaining warships were spread thin, defending more vital systems. To send aid would risk leaving other sectors exposed. Commander Ward stepped forward. Then let us go. We have a ship. We have weapons. We will answer this call. The Council hesitated. A single ship against a Vorlak strike fleet was madness. But the humans insisted. Let us prove ourselves, Ward said. You asked for help. This is our response. At last they agreed. The human warship would go, accompanied only by a few small Coalition scouts to observe. If nothing else, the mission would show whether humanity's promises were more than words. The first battle. The human ship entered the colony system quietly, sensors scanning the void. The Vorlak fleet was already there. 3 cruisers, 5 destroyers, and a swarm of attack craft. Against them, the humans had only one vessel. The Coalition scouts prepared to record what they assumed would be a hopeless stand. But the humans did not charge blindly. They observed. They measured. They waited. Then Commander Ward gave his first order. The human ship accelerated in an unpredictable pattern, zigzagging at odd angles, using bursts of speed and sudden stops. Coalition officers watching the battle were confused. No captain would dare waste energy like that, yet the Vorlak reacted poorly. Their ships were built for direct, powerful engagements, not for chasing prey that moved like lightning. The humans fired suddenly, targeting not the largest cruisers but the smaller support craft. Their weapons cut through shields with surprising accuracy. One by one, the Vorlak destroyers fell, leaving the cruisers exposed. The enemy tried to surround the human ship, but Ward anticipated them. Using gravity slingshots around moons and asteroids, the human vessel slipped past their lines again and again. Coalition officers gasped at the maneuvers, reckless, dangerous, yet perfectly executed. Within hours, the Vorlak were retreating. A single human warship had done what entire Coalition fleets had failed to achieve. They had forced the enemy to withdraw. The colony was saved. The reaction's news spread like wildfire across the Coalition. At first, many refused to believe it. How could one ship, crewed by a species that had never fought beyond its own world, defeat a Vorlak strike fleet? But the recordings told the truth. Every maneuver, every strike, every retreat of the Vorlak, it was all captured and shown to the Council. For the first time since the fall of Carthion, hope returned. Citizens cheered in hidden shelters, soldiers stood taller, and commanders began to imagine victory again. Yet not all were comfortable. Councillor Vanos of the Vanar spoke with sharp concern. They are dangerous. Do you not see it? They think differently than us. They risk everything without hesitation. Today it worked. Tomorrow it may doom us all. but Elder Melkor answered calmly. Perhaps it is because they think differently that we need them. We have fought the Vorlak with logic, and logic has failed us. The humans fight with something else, with imagination, with unpredictability. That may be the one thing the Vorlak cannot match. The debate continued, but no one could deny the result. Humanity had proven itself. Among the soldiers, while leaders argued, soldiers whispered of the humans with admiration. On the colony that had been saved, people told stories of the strange warship that had come from the stars, piloted by beings who fought like no one else. Children drew pictures of human ships, and workers painted human emblems on their walls. In military barracks, coalition officers replayed the recordings of human maneuvers, trying to learn from them. Some shook their heads, saying no trained fleet would ever dare such recklessness. Others saw brilliance. Siriel, who had doubted before, spoke softly to Captain Reinar as they watched the footage. They are not bound by fear of mistakes. They try what no one else dares. Perhaps that is their greatest weapon. Reinar nodded. Or their greatest weakness. Time will tell. But even he felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he had almost forgotten. Hope. The Vorlak response. The Vorlak did not ignore the loss. Their commanders were furious. Never before had a single vessel humiliated them. They studied the recordings carefully, trying to understand this new enemy. But the humans' maneuvers made little sense to them. The Vorlak believed in strength, in overwhelming power, not in unpredictability. To them, the humans seemed irrational, chaotic. Primitive tricks, one Vorlak commander sneered. They will not work again. Yet behind their pride, unease grew. If one human ship could force them to retreat, what would happen if more joined the fight? The choice of humanity. Back on Earth, humanity received the news of their first victory. For the people of Earth, it was more than just a battle. It was proof that they could stand among the stars as equals, perhaps even as leaders. Debates rose among human leaders. Some argued they should stay cautious, avoid entangling themselves too deeply in a galactic war. Others argued the opposite, that this was humanity's chance to prove itself, to rise beyond its own world. In the end, Commander Ward gave his report clearly. The coalition is weak, but not broken. They need us, and the Vorlak must be stopped. If we do nothing, the galaxy will fall and Earth will not be safe forever. Better to face the storm now than wait for it to find us later. The decision was made. Humanity would not remain on the sidelines. More ships would be prepared. More soldiers trained. Earth would stand with the coalition. A new beginning. The humans' first battle became a story told in every corner of the galaxy. Not just because of the victory, but because of the way it was won. With daring. With creativity. With defiance. The Vorlak had celebrated too soon, believing the galaxy broken. But in the shadows of despair, a new fire had been lit, and that fire had a name. Humanity. The galaxy was changing. The story of a single human warship defeating a Vorlak strike fleet spread across every star system. To many it seemed unbelievable, but the recordings proved it true. Where once the coalition had lived in fear, now whispers of hope filled every world. The Vorlak, who had once been seen as unstoppable, were suddenly vulnerable. Not because their fleets had grown weaker, but because humanity had shown a new way to fight. And that way spread like fire. The arrival of more humans weeks turned into months, and humanity prepared more ships. Earth was not as wealthy or advanced as the great coalition worlds, but it had something others lacked. Determination. Factories worked without rest. Engineers adapted alien designs, and soldiers volunteered eagerly. The coalition watched with surprise. Where many species hesitated to risk their lives, humans stepped forward without pause. They did not fight for duty alone, but for choice, for pride, and for the challenge. Soon, the first human squadron arrived. 5 ships, sleek and angular, armed with both human invention and coalition upgrades. They joined the front lines where battles raged endlessly. The difference was immediate. Learning from the humans, the first combined operation began near the fractured world of Draven 4. Vorlak forces had established a fortress on its surface, using it as a base to raid nearby systems. Coalition fleets had tried to dislodge them several times, but each attempt ended in failure. The Vorlak defenses were too strong, their commanders too clever. This time, the humans led the assault. Commander Ward and his squadron studied the battlefield differently. While Coalition admirals saw walls too thick to break, Ward saw weaknesses. They are disciplined, he explained to the gathered council of commanders. Disciplined means predictable. Predictable means vulnerable. The humans launched their plan. Instead of attacking head-on, they staged diversions, sending smaller ships to create false signals and confuse the Vorlak sensors. They used asteroid belts as cover, hiding vessels until the last moment. Then, when the Vorlak fleet moved to respond, the human squadron struck from an unexpected angle, breaking their formation. The Coalition ships, inspired by the chaos, surged forward. For the first time in years, Draven 4 was reclaimed. The people of the Coalition celebrated, not only because they had won, but because they had seen how to win. One officer whispered to another, "They do not fight like us. They fight like storms, unpredictable but unstoppable. Fear in the enemy. The Vorlak commanders could not understand. For centuries they had studied their enemies, breaking every pattern of defense, exploiting every weakness. But the humans had no clear pattern. Their strategies shifted too quickly. Their decisions seemed reckless, yet they succeeded again and again. Reports spread among Vorlak fleets. Do not underestimate the humans. Do not expect them to fight with reason. Expect the unexpected. And yet, even with this knowledge, the Vorlak continued to suffer losses. Their soldiers were strong, but strength alone could not counter the imagination of humanity. Inspiration. Across the galaxy, the impact of humanity was not only measured in victories, it was also measured in courage. Coalition soldiers who had once fought without spirit now carried human banners beside their own. Pilots decorated their ships with human symbols, believing it brought them luck. Civilians whispered of Earth as a legend, the world that smiled in the face of despair. On the council floor, arguments still flared. Some leaders worried that the humans were too bold, that their reckless methods might one day collapse. But others saw the truth. Without humans, the Coalition would already be lost. Elder Malkor said it simply, "They remind us of who we used to be. Before fear, before despair, we too once believed the impossible could be done. Humanity has returned that memory to us." The liberation of Kalros. The greatest test came at the planet Kalros. It had been under Vorlak control for years, its people enslaved, its surface turned into a fortress world. To reclaim it would be to strike a blow so deep that even the Vorlak could not ignore it. Coalition admirals hesitated. The fortress was powerful, and the Vorlak garrison immense. To attack seemed like suicide. But humanity pressed forward. Commander Ward studied maps, examined weak points, and then presented a daring plan. The key was not brute force, but surprise. Instead of attacking from the expected approach, the human fleet would take a hidden route through dangerous nebulae, where even sensors struggled. From there, they would strike directly at the fortress command center, leaving the rest of the Vorlak forces in confusion. It was a plan no Coalition commander would have accepted, but the humans volunteered. The mission began in silence. Ships vanished into the nebula, where lightning storms flashed across their hulls and navigation was nearly impossible. More than once, Coalition officers begged to turn back, but the humans pressed forward, guided by instinct and daring. When they emerged, they were behind the fortress defenses. The Vorlak never expected an attack from that angle. By the time they realized what had happened, human ships were already inside the command zone, blasting power stations and shield generators. The Coalition fleet surged in from the front, meeting far less resistance than expected. Within days, Kalros was liberated. Its people wept with joy, and across the stars, the Coalition celebrated the impossible victory. And at the center of every story, every song, every message, was one truth. The humans had made it possible. The change in the Coalition as the war continued. Humans trained Coalition soldiers, teaching them new tactics. They showed them how to think differently, to act boldly, to fight with creativity rather than fear. Slowly, the Coalition began to change. Fleets that once fought in rigid patterns now used deception and surprise. Commanders who once hesitated now acted quickly, inspired by human courage. Soldiers who once gave up now pressed on, shouting words they had learned from their new allies. Never stop. Never surrender. The Vorlak felt the difference. Battles that had once been easy victories now turned against them. Worlds they had conquered began to rise in rebellion, encouraged by the thought that the Vorlak could be defeated. Doubt among the enemy, in the Vorlak High Command, unease spread. Reports showed losses piling up, rebellions breaking out and morale fading. The name human was spoken with anger and fear. They are a small species, one commander snarled. Primitive, fragile, yet they spread chaos wherever they go. Another replied with bitterness. Perhaps chaos itself is their weapon, and perhaps it is one we cannot counter. The Vorlak had celebrated too soon. The growing bond, meanwhile, on Earth, humanity's role in the war deepened. More ships were sent, more soldiers volunteered. Families on distant worlds sent messages of thanks to Earth, calling humans brothers and sisters in arms. A bond was forming, stronger than politics, stronger than treaties. The coalition was no longer only an alliance of necessity. It was becoming a family of survival, held together by the spark that humanity had lit. Cyril said it best in a quiet moment to Captain Reinar. We were broken, then we found them. They are not just allies, Reinar. They are a reminder. They remind us that even in the darkest night, someone can still light a fire. Toward the final battle yet, everyone knew the war was not over. The Vorlak still held countless systems and their empire was vast. Victory would not come easily, but the tide had turned. Where once despair ruled, now hope marched. Where once the Vorlak celebrated, now they hesitated. And at the center of it all stood humanity, new to the stars but carrying an ancient spirit the galaxy had forgotten. The coalition had begun to believe again, and the Vorlak had begun to fear. The war was far from finished, but one truth echoed across the stars. The galaxy would not fall. Not while the humans stood. The war had reached its greatest moment. The coalition, once broken and hopeless, now stood strong again. Humanity's arrival had not only changed the way battles were fought, but also the way soldiers believed in themselves. Every fleet, every world now whispered the same thought. The Vorlak can be defeated. The Vorlak Empire, which had ruled with fear for generations, began to feel cracks. Their fleets were still vast, but their certainty had faded. They no longer saw themselves as invincible, and that fear was the beginning of their downfall. The Council's decision, the Coalition High Council met in a grand chamber above the planet Kireth. Leaders from many species gathered to decide the final step. Some argued to defend, to wait, and to weaken the Vorlak slowly. Others demanded a full assault, but the human commanders spoke clearly. If we keep waiting, they will recover, Commander Ward explained. If we strike now, while they doubt themselves, we can end this war. Not in years, but now. There was silence in the chamber. For many, the thought of striking the Vorlak homeworld was terrifying. No fleet had ever reached it. But then Elder Melkor, once the strongest voice of caution, spoke. The humans are right. We must strike. If we hesitate, the darkness will return. If we fight, we bring light to all. The decision was made. The largest fleet in history would be formed. Humans and coalition together would face the Vorlak at the heart of their empire. Preparing for the final battle, the preparations were vast. Hundreds of ships gathered from every allied world. Factories burned day and night to make weapons and supplies. Soldiers trained harder than ever before. On Earth, families wrote messages to those who would not return. On other worlds, children painted pictures of human and alien soldiers standing side by side. Hope had become something living, something real. For the humans, this was not just about survival. It was about proving that courage could change the stars. For the coalition, it was about freedom after generations of fear. The march to war the fleet set out. From dozens of jump points they converged, thousands of ships moving like a single wave of light across the void. At the center were the human squadrons, small compared to the vast fleets of other worlds, but carrying the spirit that had started it all. As the fleet traveled, messages spread across every world still under Vorlak rule. We are coming. Hold on, you are not forgotten. The people rose up. On enslaved planets, workers sabotaged Vorlak machines. On conquered colonies, rebels struck from the shadows. The galaxy itself seemed to rise against the conquerors. The last stand of the Vorlak. The Vorlak High Command gathered its remaining strength. Countless ships filled the skies of their home system. Defense stations burned with power. It was the largest fortress ever built in the stars. When the Coalition fleet arrived, the battle began immediately. Vorlak warships attacked with precision, their discipline unmatched. Waves of fire lit the void. Entire squadrons of Coalition ships were destroyed in the opening hours. But humanity had taught the galaxy something new. Instead of following a single rigid plan, the fleet shifted again and again. Humans led daring raids, striking weak points and vanishing before the Vorlak could react. Coalition ships followed their example, breaking free of fear, using creativity instead of caution. The Vorlak fought hard, but they could no longer predict their enemies. Every time they thought they understood the battle, the humans surprised them again, the turning point at the height of the battle. The Vorlak released their secret weapon, a massive warship larger than any ever seen. It carried enough firepower to break fleets by itself. Its arrival shook the Coalition's courage. The massive ship cut through their lines, destroying dozens of vessels. For a moment it seemed the old fear had returned, but then the humans acted. Commander Ward gathered a small squadron. "We will take it down," he said simply. Others called it madness. No ship so small could defeat such a monster. But Ward only smiled. "That's what they always say until we prove them wrong." The squadron flew directly into the path of the giant. Enemy fire filled the void, but the humans dodged and weaved, pressing closer. They aimed not at the strongest shields, but at the hidden weaknesses, the vents, the joints, the systems that no one else dared to target. One by one, the squadron fell, but they struck deep wounds into the great ship, and then with a final desperate run, Ward's flagship plunged into the warship's core, delivering a blow so powerful it tore the beast apart. The explosion lit the sky, and every Coalition ship cheered. The impossible had been done again, because the humans believed it could be done. The collapse of the Vorlak, the destruction of their greatest ship, broke the Vorlak's spirit. Their formations crumbled, their commanders argued, and their soldiers began to retreat. The Coalition pressed forward with all its strength, driving the enemy back toward their homeworld. On the surface of the Vorlak capital, the people watched in shock as the once invincible empire began to fall. For generations they had believed victory was certain. Now they saw their fleets burn and they felt fear for the first time. The Coalition landed on the planet not as conquerors, but as liberators. They destroyed the war factories, freed the enslaved, and dismantled the weapons of terror. The Vorlak leaders were captured, not killed. For the humans had insisted, "We fight to end the war, not to become what we hated." And so the war ended. The celebration across the galaxy, stars seemed brighter. Bells rang, voices sang, and entire worlds celebrated together. Planets that had once lived under chains now danced in freedom. For the first time in memory, the Vorlak Empire no longer ruled with fear. In every celebration, the humans were honored. Statues were raised. Stories were told. And songs were sung of Earth's children who had arrived when hope was gone. Children on alien worlds pretended to be humans in their games, shouting words of courage and "Never stop, never surrender." And on Earth itself, families wept with pride. They had sent their sons and daughters into the unknown, and those sons and daughters had lit a fire that saved a galaxy. The legacy years passed, and peace returned. The Coalition rebuilt its worlds, repaired its cities, and healed its wounds. The Vorlak were no longer feared, but remembered as a warning of what happens when power is used without honor. Humanity, once seen as young and small, now stood as one of the galaxy's leaders. Not because of their technology or numbers, but because of their spirit. Elder Malkor, in his final speech, said it best. The humans were not stronger than the Vorlak. They were not richer, nor older, nor wiser. But they carried something the Vorlak could never understand. The courage to face despair and laugh in its face. That courage has saved us all, and so humanity's legacy spread, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as the ones who reminded the stars of hope. A galaxy united. The Coalition was no longer only an alliance of survival. It had become a family. Humans and aliens lived together, worked together, and dreamed together. New generations grew up never knowing the old fear, but knowing the stories of how it ended. Every year, across every world, a single day was remembered, the day the Vorlak fell. And on that day, children would gather to hear the same story. The story of how the galaxy had almost been lost, and how one small world called Earth had turned the tide. Epilogue. On a quiet hill on Earth, a monument stood. It was simple, made of stone, carved with words in 100 languages. The message was the same for all. They thought we would break. They thought we would fall. But we stood, and because we stood, the stars are free. And beneath those words was a single line, carved by hand. Our enemies celebrated too soon because we contacted a human. The galaxy never forgot.